Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. I guess for those of you that are new, um, I recently signed up for a text alert service. So if you're interested in getting a text message when I go live, you can get one. So how you do that is you go on your phone and text the words Dana Live, DANALIVE, all one word, to the number 22999. So again, that's the words Dana Live, but all one word, to the text number 22999, and you'll get a notification when I go live. As far as I know, I think this only works for the United States and Canada. Um, so I apologize. Hopefully they extend their service to other areas. So welcome, welcome. And I have to apologize too, a little confession time. I was running really late and I gobbled down my dinner and now I am painfully full. So if you see me kind of moaning and groaning and uh yeah, that's what's going on. That was a terrible idea. Now I have heartburn and I am very physically uncomfortable. That this was not the solution that I was thinking it would be. So, how is everybody doing? How is your week going? Is everybody what are you guys doing for Thanksgiving? How is everybody feeling about life in general? You know what? Actually, while people are kind of trickling in, I wanted to bring up a concept, and I don't know if I talked about this last week. I don't think I did, but I apologize if I did, because I'm going to talk about it again because I think it's very significant. And the concept is called, well, there's two types of it. It's positive sentiment override and negative sentiment override. And this was identified, let's see, well, it was identified by a psychologist. I want to make sure I'm saying this correctly. Gottman was the psychologist. And so basically, um, it has to do with kind of how we're perceiving others, in particular our partner. So if there's a positive sentiment override, then it's kind of mm, behavior is filtered through that lens of positive sentiment. So for example, if your significant other was 20 minutes late getting home, or if they canceled plans last minute, or if something were out of the ordinary were to happen, positive sentiment override would be the feeling of, oh, well, I, I am thinking positively about them and their intentions towards me, and generally for good reason, right? So their behavior up to that point has shown that they're trustworthy, that they're reliable, that there's no reason to doubt or be suspicious of their behavior. Negative sentiment override tends to fall into the category of the exact opposite. So anything out of the ordinary, let's say, everything seems to kind of be filtered through that lens of negativity, suspicious, just suspicion, paranoia, um, these kinds of things. So when we're dating a person, or if when we're in a relationship with a person, one of the most important factors that needs to really be there is that feeling of um, emotional dependence, emotional availability, the ability, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, emotional availability, not necessarily emotional dependence, but the ability to connect to the other person. And that's how emotional stability and emotional trust is formed in relationships, is that ability to connect and to be present, and to be able to have effective communication, and all of these other things. When uh, when we're in a relationship with a very toxic or dysfunctional person, then especially one who's continually like projecting, or projecting in the sense of like accusing us of doing things we're not doing, they're continually suspicious and paranoid, and these kinds of things. I guess the point of what I'm trying to say is it's important to realize that if a person has this inherent kind of negative sentiment override towards everything that you're doing, that you're not the one that's harming the relationship. And there's really nothing that you can do in order to prove to them otherwise. Like, this is kind of a deep seated thing within them. And um, now you might be thinking, or feeling like, oh my gosh, no, I'm doing that. Maybe you're at a place in your life and in your relationships where you're feeling that you're highly suspicious of everything that other people do, and that you're feeling that you've kind of taken on that negative sentiment override. There's a difference there. This feeling of hypervigilance, of trouble trusting other people, feeling anxious and on edge, a lot of that has to do with a traumatic situation, as that's a result of a traumatic situation, which is a relationship with, um, you know, highly people with highly problematic behavior. So it's a little bit different. Um, I think it can kind of help to view it in terms of, was there anything that sparked it off? So if your partner's done all kinds of squirrely things and they refuse to talk about it, they shut down communication, they defend their actions, they deflect them, they deny them, they blame, they shame, they do everything other than give a reasonable, rational explanation as to what's going on, then um, that's the issue isn't with you, it's with them, because there is no being reasonable with an unreasonable person. So, okay, let me scroll up here. Um, Bridget says, my week has been okay. My friend invited me to her Thanksgiving. I've been struggling because last year, this time, I was with my ex, and the flashbacks are painful. Yes. Yes. Holidays in general are difficult for a lot of people, and absolutely understandably so, if this is the first holiday without that relationship. So, um, I would encourage you to, if you do end up spending time with her, to intentionally and deliberately go about making new memories for tomorrow. Ideally fun, positive, just wonderful memories. Think of it as like overwriting. If you remember CDs, like back in the day, or DVDs, if you would overwrite it, you would erase what was there and you would replace it with something new. It's very much the same concept. So if all of the data that's currently on that disk that is your brain has to do with memories of your ex and this previous relationship, and all of this pain and this heaviness, uh, to intentionally go about having a great time with her as a way to kind of add to or replace those painful memories with new memories. It can be a very effective Very effective technique. This isn't to say that the pain of your ex and that relationship isn't something that's worth processing and working through. It absolutely is. But at the same time, kind of working through those emotions and feeling them and processing them and doing all of that work, it takes time. And um, I think personally, I think it's completely okay to work on overwriting uncomfortable memories with pleasant ones. And that doesn't somehow cheat you out of the healing process or bypass it in any way. It just means that you're taking ownership and starting to um, reclaim certain parts of your life. So Jennifer asks, "What did you have for dinner?" I had Chinese food. I'm so full. I had these steamed vegetables, and I guess that was lo mein. So noodles and a heaping bowl of broccoli and steamed cabbage. It was absolutely delicious, but I am seriously painfully full. So you guys, I appreciate you bearing with me here. Uh, let's see. Jennifer says, "I saw a psychiatric nurse yesterday, something my therapist has been wanting me to do. The psych nurse told me he definitely thinks I have major anxiety. He's not so sure that I have PTSD like the last psychiatrist I saw said, which was a few years ago. He thinks I may have OCD like my last psychiatrist said. He gave me a temporary prescription for Ativan, but he offered to have me try GeneSight testing to come up with a drug for me based on my DNA. It sounded interesting, so I'm going to give it a go. Should be ready in a few weeks." Yeah, that GeneSight testing, um, I will be curious. When I got out of nursing, that the DNA testing was only done for people that had pretty severe conditions that were quote unquote like treatment resistant to other medications. And we did the DNA testing. I can count on one hand how many people we did it for. Again, I don't even know if it's the same test because this was a while back, but it's a mouth swab, and then they send it off, and then it'll come back with saying, okay, you're more inclined to do well on certain medications and not so well on others. And it's interesting stuff. I'll be curious to know if that works for you. I would encourage you to absolutely make sure that your insurance covers it before you get it done because it's expensive, and um, insurance tends to be fairly resistant to covering anything that it's not deemed absolutely necessary. And in order for something to be considered absolutely necessary, there needs to, more often than not, there needs to be a long paper trail of other medications that were unsuccessful with treating whatever issue. So just something to keep in mind so you don't get surprised by a giant bill. The thing too I wanted to mention about PTSD is it's going to depend on the um, a lot of it depends on kind of when how soon after a trauma a person gets diagnosed, because certain symptoms for PTSD, like the hypervigilance, the night terrors, um, the anxiety, the um, trouble trusting other people, kind of that whole all of the symptoms. In part, that's a normal response to a very abnormal situation, but And for the vast majority of people, those symptoms do tend to diminish with time. It's just kind of, we get locked into this like flight mode, like fight or flight, but it tends to be more of that, I guess, somewhere in the middle of that mode after a traumatic event. If those symptoms go on for months on end, then it's definitely, there's more going on there, and it's worth, um, I mean, I guess it's always worth talking to your health provider if there's any, if there's any concerns that you have about your health in general, but especially if symptoms are going on for months on end, then it's worth addressing. Uh, Jen asked, how did you transition to being a therapist? I retired my RN license. Well, I decided to make the jump to going for my master's degree in counseling. And so I did. When I was a nurse, I started off doing hospice nursing and home health, and then moved into psychiatric nursing, and had always been very interested in um, trauma and various forms of trauma. And the more I worked in the mental health field, the more I was like, man, I just really feel like there's a lot of unprocessed trauma here. Like, this is what we're really seeing day in and day out. And I just kind of feel like the way that we're currently handling it or addressing it isn't as effective as it could be. And then I ended up reading, just stumbling across the book The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And that was it. That was it for me. I'm like, yep, bingo. There's so much more going on here. And so I knew I wanted to be able to work with um, people in a different capacity rather than as a nurse. Even though I loved nursing, I just wanted to work in more of, like, I guess, the cognitive, psychotherapeutic, in a psychotherapeutic role. So yeah, that's how I. It was a long process. That's how I made that transition. Julie asks, how do I deflect intrusive questions by my mother tomorrow on Thanksgiving? We haven't spoken for months. We have a strained relationship, and she is a narcissist. Okay, so first and foremost, it's fantastic that you are aware of what you're walking into tomorrow. And you're probably right that it's going to be intrusive questions. And so, kind of preparing yourself ahead of time, both emotionally and cognitively. So, thinking about some responses now to some of her questions. And so, if and when they do come up, that you have some sort of canned response, that way it doesn't catch you so off guard to where you're just left speechless. So, coming up with some sort of response. Um, So let's see, because we can't obviously anticipate every single thing that she might ask, but we can anticipate kind of the general nature of questions, maybe coming up with some sort of response along the lines of, um, oh, oh, mom, that's a great question, and it's a long answer. That's a conversation for another day. Something like that. So I say this because the other option would be to be assertive and be direct, which I'm generally an advocate for. However, when it comes to um, family that tends to push boundaries and they don't respect boundaries, they're also not going to respect assertive communication. And they tend to interpret assertive communication as aggressive communication because they're not good with boundaries. So if you don't give in and give them the information that they want, it's not uncommon for people like that to then get defensive. Oh, well, I just want to know, and I'm your mother, and don't you think I should know? And what, you just want me out of your life completely? Well, I suppose, right? And they just go on and on and on and on and on. So to avoid all of that, it's helpful to realize kind of what does and doesn't work. So again, you know your situation better than me. So if you've tried being assertive before and avoiding conversations, or telling her that you're not comfortable having them or whatnot, then this kind of, it's almost like a Tai Chi approach to conversation with difficult people tends to work best. So this way you're basically agreeing with her. And so instead of pushing against her, instead of engaging in that resistance, which is just going to kick off defensiveness, you're agreeing. And when people agree, even if there's nothing really to agree to, but if they sense that you're on the same side, it kind of takes the wind out of their sails because there's nothing to argue about. So if she wants to know about who you're dating and what you're doing with your money and what about your job and all of these deeply personal questions that aren't any of her business, um, I would just take a very light approach to it. Oh, mom, yeah, that's a really great question. That has a really great answer, but it's a long answer, and that's a conversation for another time. And then you just switch topics. And if you don't think that'll work, then you say something, some sort of placating phrase like that. And then you say, oh, that's a topic for another time. But right now I've got to go to the bathroom. And then you just get up and you leave the room. So, and you ideally too, if it's, if it's family, I'm a big fan of, if you know difficult people are going to be present, then trying to set up the environment to where you have as much control as possible. So what this tends to look like is, well, what this does look like is, instead of, now it's a little bit late in the game because it's tomorrow, but to have family gatherings at other people's places and you provide your own transportation, which means that you show up over there and you're able to leave whenever you want to leave. You're not riding with somebody, you're not have, because that way you don't want to be waiting on somebody else to dictate when you're going to leave. Even if you're the driver, you just want to go alone, have your own transportation, or take an Uber, or take an Uber home. Some sort of plan to where you stay there for as long as it's comfortable for you, and then you leave. So if you're finding your stress level rising, and it's very quickly getting to the point of, I don't know how much longer I can keep my cool. I'm either going to start crying, or I'm going to start yelling, or I'm going to start drinking, and then I'll start crying and yelling. Then it's time to go. So when you get to that point, ideally before you get to that point, it's always nicer when you can leave on a pleasant note and letting people know ahead of time, oh, hi, it's so great to see everybody. I can only stay for a little while. And maybe just leave your time frame vague. I can only stay for a little while, and kind of say your hellos, engage, just keep conversation, chit chat pleasant, keep it brief, keep it vague, um, avoid hot button topics, but be prepared for kind of people that struggle with boundaries to struggle with boundaries, and to ask things that are uncomfortable, and to think about what you're going to say in response to that. And then when it gets to the place of, you know what, my stress level, it's a rising, and you know, don't wait until it's absolutely like code red before you walk out the door. By then, it's it's kind of too late. You know what I mean? Um, and too late in the sense of, odds are you've probably said and done things that have stirred the pot. and they've said and done things that have stirred the pot. And now things are even more awkward, and they're going to continue to be more awkward. And not only that, but emotionally, your emotions are at a code red level. And it's probably going to take you a few days to unwind from that. And it's not worth it. And it doesn't need to be that way. So I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about this, about um, uh, kind of being able to differentiate between green, yellow, red. So thinking about our life in terms of different zones. So green is like cool, calm, collected, comfortable, just kind of cruising along. Yellow is like a little uncomfortable, slow down, warning, caution, proceed with caution. And red is absolutely stop, warning, warning, warning kind of a thing. And what so many of us tend to do is we gloss over the yellow and we think, oh, I can handle this, or it's not so bad, or it could be worse, or um, we feel obligated. Oh, I need to stay for at least 4 hours for Thanksgiving because, I only see certain people once a year, and you know, I'm obligated to do this. I just need to deal with it. And so we're continually trying to silence those feelings of annoyance, irritation, frustration, anger, resentment, all of these things. And of course that doesn't work. But we're lying to ourselves. We're minimizing how we're feeling. And those feelings are getting louder and louder and louder. And kind of it gets to the point where every single thing that person does just annoys you to no end. And next thing you know, you're in the red zone. And even it's very difficult to kind of come down from that red zone, and it takes a lot longer than it does to come down from the yellow zone. So I guess I would just encourage everybody to think about kind of where your red zone is, where your yellow zone is, and where your green zone is, and how you feel. What are the feelings that you experience in each of those zones? How do you know when you're in a yellow zone versus when you're in a red zone or a green zone? Getting clear with yourself is huge, is huge. And once you start making that shift from doing things out of obligation to doing things out of um, either enjoyment or the challenge, because you enjoy the challenge of it, if it's something somewhat difficult, uh, it's just game changing. So just some things to think about. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up. Um. Okay, Mariah. I think that's Mariah. Mariah asks advice for family of daughter in narcissistically abusive relationship for 10 years. Won't leave, gets angry with us, sticks up for him. How to stay healthy and still be there for her. She and BB are not allowed to visit. I'm always worried. Well, one of the biggest things has to do with shifting the way that you're interacting with her. So we can all get like this. If we're doing something that we know is a problem, that we know deep down is a problem, and if somebody keeps bringing it up to us, but we don't want to stop what we're doing, we're going to get defensive. So, most likely, deep down, she knows there's a problem. She's probably embarrassed and ashamed by the way that he treats her. But if she's not ready to leave that relationship yet, if she's still in denial, and if she's still thinking that she can make it work and that she just needs to change all of her behavior, and then he'll eventually start treating her with dignity and respect and be the man that she hopes he can be. If she's still in that denial phase, then she's going to view everything that you're saying as attacking, instead of it coming across as uh, well-intended, um, like well-intended concern, I guess. So it's important that we're able to see and adjust our communication kind of to the quote unquote audience that we're trying to reach. So the way that you're communicating with her is not having the effect that you're wanting it to have. So this is a very clear sign to change your approach. And one of the biggest things that can help a person leave an abusive relationship is for them to have a support system. And it's because the dynamic of an abusive relationship can become very exhausting for other people around them because it's illogical. They're being treated terribly. Their friends and families get upset. They keep bringing it up. The person doesn't want to hear it. They keep justifying their mistreatment. Oh, he or she didn't mean it. They had a bad day. They had a bad week. They had a bad childhood. They had too much to drink. It was this. It was that. It's always an excuse. This makes friends and family around them nuts and very angry because they want the person to snap out of it and see the problem for what it is. But if that person's not, um, if they're defending their relationship, then they're not at a place where anything that you say that they're actually going to hear. If anything, it's going to have that opposite effect where they're going to start pulling away, feeling like, oh, well, geez, my mom just doesn't support my relationship. And so then they start getting distance. So what can help is letting her know that you love her and that you're there for her. And if you do find yourself, because I get it, it's hard, it's very difficult to not um, go into attack mode, especially if you're the mama. You go into mama bear mode where you want to point out how awful this guy is and how she deserves better and all of this stuff. If you catch yourself going into that mode and you realize that she's getting defensive and frustrated and upset with you, then I would encourage you to apologize. Apologize to her and say, you know what, sweetie, I'm sorry. I get so worked up about this. Um, you already know how I feel about him, and I don't need to keep harping on it. And I really, I'm here for you and I don't want this relationship to come between us. I'm always here for you. I'm always in your corner. Like I love you. And doing that. When she realizes that you truly are in her corner and that you're not trying to break up her relationship or that you're not attacking her, because this is people that are in abusive relationships get this a lot of, oh, what's wrong with you? You just need to wake up. He treats you terribly. Why can't you see that? This kind of stuff. And oftentimes that comes from people that are very well intended, but the impact tends to be it's very shaming, and it causes embarrassment, and the person on the receiving end of it tends to pull away. So if you want to, I would encourage you to do everything in your power to keep communication open between you and your daughter. And that's probably going to mean talking about everything under the sun other than her relationship. Talk about TV shows that she's watched lately, how she's doing with pandemic stuff, how's work, how's you know, everything else other than her relationship. So, okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Um, okay, Lori, that's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. She says, okay, I'm confused. I know I am a codependent and now discovered I am an empath, a relationship, emotional, maybe more. So, what do I work on first? I have no therapist. Okay, so let's untangle this a little bit. In a nutshell, codependency is more related to an excessive emotional reliance on other people, particularly partners, significant others, and it can definitely expand to friends and other people in our inner circle. When there is that significant or excessive, that would be the key word there, excessive emotional reliance on others, that kicks off this chain reaction of all kinds of things. So as a result of that, a person who struggling with codependency tends to have very poor boundaries because they don't want to lose any of their relationships because they're excessively reliant on other people. They're looking to other people for validation, for approval, for acceptance, for their self-esteem. They have a very outwardly focused view, and they're looking outside of themselves for answers, for validation, for approval, for all of these things, for self-esteem. That's a very difficult way to live. And especially if we get tangled up with a very damaging person, because then that person who who's looking outside of themselves for all of this to basically feel okay in the world, they're going to go on this whole emotional roller coaster of ups and downs, uh, trying to kind of navigate life. And the result is people pleasing. The result is putting their own wants and needs second or last, generally last, to make everybody else okay. And and that's problematic in so many ways. Truly, the label codependence, it's almost like pulling a string on a sweater and it just keeps unraveling because there's a lot to it. That excessive emotional reliance is truly just like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more underneath it. With the term empath, that is the term where it's basically a person that has um, an unusually high degree of empathy for other people. It almost can feel like to a supernatural level, but it's not. It's just because it's so finely tuned. And frankly, I would say the vast majority of time, the reason why quote unquote empaths are highly attuned people have this um, kind of overabundance of emotional perceptiveness has to do with how they were raised. So if you were raised in a home where your own feelings didn't matter, or you were told that they needed to come last and that maybe one or more people in that household had to come first. This is very common with the situation if you have a parent who, or a family member at all, frankly, who is struggling with addiction of any kind. It could be gambling, shopping. If there's I would say addictive, compulsive, or behavior that's going to impact how they emotionally connect to their child, to you. If there's untreated mental illness there, depression, or other forms of untreated mental illness, to where there's not predictable and reliable and nurturing behavior on a regular basis. If there's active addictions in the home to where you're having to continually, or abuse of any kind, where you're having to continually scan the environment for signs of danger. Uh-oh, is dad going to come home drunk? Is mom going to start yelling? What's going to go on? All of that tends to be perceived. And so as an adult, or as a person from a home environment like that starts getting older, they're very highly in tune to the environment. You might have noticed yourself doing this, where you can walk into a room and you're like, ooh, yeah, man, the tension in here is really thick. And you have a pretty good feeling of, say you walk into an office meeting and you're like, ooh, okay, this person's like upset. And maybe I think that they're upset with this other person. And here's kind of what's going on here. And you're able to really get a pretty accurate understanding of what's going on in the room. And maybe afterwards, as you're leaving, you're talking to a coworker about all of everything that's been unsaid, all of the nonverbal language that's been going on in that environment. And let's say your coworker didn't pick up on any of that. They're like, what are you talking about? No. And then you find out later, yeah, actually, that's exactly what's going on. There's this whole, um, conflict in, you nailed it. That tends to be very accurate. So empaths, and again, I would say more often than not, imp people that identify as empaths and people that struggle with that excessive emotional reliance on others, I think there tends to be a pretty significant overlap between the two. And the reason being is we all tend to gravitate towards what is the most comfortable for us in many, many different ways, but especially in terms of relationship roles. So if we are used to being in a certain role, and I think for most empaths, especially, um, and most people that have excessive emotional reliance on others, it tends to be in the role of, we're kind of the natural helpers of the world. So we tend to gravitate towards jobs like that, and we tend to be really good at them because we're really great at people pleasing. And we're really great at trying to help everybody else get their wants and needs met, even if it's at the expense of our own. So in that plays out not just in work roles, but it plays out in relationship roles too. So you might notice, oh, I always kind of tend to find the baby bird with the broken wing, right? The people that need help. And we gravitate towards them because it feels it like, this is just what I do. I'm just a natural helper and I really enjoy helping other people. There's nothing inherently wrong with that if we're also able to, take care of ourselves and make our own wants and needs a priority, and self-care and all of that. It gets really out of balance if we're not able to do that. And instead, uh, turn down the volume on our own wants and needs, and instead make everybody else a priority. And then we're kind of inadvertently martyring ourselves, but we probably don't even realize it because we think it's the right thing to do. No, I need to be there. I need to work 14 days in a row. I can't leave these people alone. Like, they need somebody to help, and if nobody else is going to do it, then it needs to be me. So it's kind of this pattern of learned behavior, um, and it tends to be more subconscious than not. And the challenge too is a lot of times this kind of behavior, it's rewarded and it's seen as really ideal behavior, especially for women. So this sense of, oh, she's so nurturing, she's so motherly, she's so caring, so compassionate. um and it's seen as good for men too, but I think not as ideal for men as it is for women. um People tend to be rewarded, oh, they're so kind of quote unquote go with the flow, they're so team oriented, when really it's, oh yeah, I'll do all of the work, take none of the credit, and uh I don't need any thanks, or like I don't need to get paid, or there's no, it's very imbalanced. And part of the challenge with this is if we are comfortable in this role of being the eternal helper, but never allowing anybody to help us, then changing into a different role is going to feel very unnatural and very uncomfortable. And so when people talk about, oh, okay, we kind of keep setting up these same dynamics over and over again, um, more or less, that's what they tend to be talking about. So when we're kind of recreating these dynamics in our adult life, that's where that's coming from. So if we're comfortable in this role, then we're going to seek out other people that are going to be comfortable with us in that role. And this is all a subconscious thing until we're aware of it, and then it becomes conscious. Or we make the dynamic very unequal. So even if they don't want us, they don't even have to be a narcissist. They don't even have to be problematic. They could be a, you know, normal, balanced, well-adjusted person. But if we're really comfortable in that kind of like one under type role, then we're going to want to make that dynamic unequal, because that's where we're comfortable. I'm comfortable. If I'm comfortable in a position of I'm serving you, I'm there for you. But if I'm uncomfortable for you being there for me, then I'm going to keep setting up that dynamic until I do something, until I have the awareness of that's really not working for me. And that's part of the problem. And that I need to go about doing something different. So, to answer your question, this is long winded. I apologize. Working on the quote unquote codependency and all of the issues that that tends to touch upon. So, boundaries, standards, deal breakers, self esteem, self worth, realizing that your wants and needs are just as important as anybody else's, and that you need and are worthy of being a priority in your own life, and developing a healthy, like functional relationship with self-care, and getting clear on what that means, what self-care means across the board. So for example, a lot of people tend to think of self-care in terms of, oh, getting your hair done, getting your nails done, taking a hot bath, I don't know, giving yourself 10 minutes to read before you go to bed at night. That's all part of self-care, and those are all wonderful things. But in a bigger picture kind of way, self-care is about boundaries and standards and deal breakers, and being in tune with how you're feeling and where your stress level is, kind of like what we were talking about earlier with that green, yellow, red zone, knowing when you're in the yellow zone and how to uh, get yourself back into green, and when you're in the red zone and what needs to shift and change in your life, because life is not to be lived in the red zone. That red zone, it's like a hot stove. We want to steer clear from it. So, um, yeah, self-care is about taking care of yourself moment to moment. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity, and it's not something that we do once a week or once a month, or when that magical intersection of time and money somehow coincide. No, we have to make it a priority, and uh, it's something that we have to be in tune with every moment of every day, and, and adjust accordingly. So if you're interested in a good book in terms of codependency, or even some good videos, Pia Melody, who, I don't know if you've heard me rave about her. I absolutely love her work. She has some old videos, which are kind of fun in and of themselves to see, from, I would say, like late 80s, early 90s, that are fantastic about codependency. She has those on YouTube, and she's written several books. Um, one there, I think there's I want to say like 3 or so in the series, and they all start with the word facing. So facing codependency is one, facing love addiction is another. I don't remember the other one, but those two will get you going down a good path. Her work is very spot on. She knows her stuff. Um, I just I think there's a lot of awareness that can come from her work. So I'll be curious to know if you get a chance to watch some of her YouTube videos, kind of, yeah, like what nuggets of wisdom, if any, do you get from them? So I hope that helps. Uh, okay, Huffle Mom, thank you. Mentions this is a member here says a king asks, um, what would you say about someone wanting to point out the narcissist to others, especially the law? It's gonna it's challenging. It's gonna depend on how um, persuasive they are and how charismatic they are and how charming they are and lots of other factors. So it's very, very difficult for, I think, kind of normal, decent people to recognize pathological behavior in other people, because we're all kind of raised to think that uh, that we're all, to some degree, we're all the same. And that if kind of it's known as the just world fallacy. So it's basically the just world fallacy is that we live in a fair and just world. If I'm nice to you, you'll be nice to me. If I have a lot of money, then it must be because I have worked hard for it. That's just kind of this bend that people tend to think. The world is not that way. There's people out there that have a lot of money that got it from all kinds of horrific, illicit, illegal ways. You can be nice to a person, and your niceness is not necessarily going to earn their nice treatment, return treatment to you. So sometimes you can be nice to a person and they're going to be mean back. And you can love somebody and they might not love you back. And do you see what I'm saying? So the reality of the world is not something that's frankly taught to the degree that it really needs to be. There's a lot of sugarcoating that goes on, and and there's so many different kind of logical fallacies that are at work, as well as psychological principles that are at work that trip people up. For example, we all have hidden biases about a lot of different things. And some of the more common ones are we have this idea that women can't be abusive, or that mothers can't be abusive, or that just generally aren't abusive, or that um, an attractive person can't be a bad person. You see this a lot in different court shows. So we all have kind of these hidden biases of what certain people who look a certain way or have certain beliefs or whatnot, what they're capable of or what kind of behavior they have. And um, I was reading a thing on Reddit yesterday. It was really funny. Somebody was kind of talking along the same lines as this, and uh, they were saying, "Yeah, whenever I hear a person talk about how they had this, criminal background and everything, and then they found the good Lord, they're like, the first thing I do is to make sure that my wallet is still in my pocket." And it was funny, but there's a lot of truth to that, because there's certain ways that a person can present that tend to be very disarming. Con artists are wonderful with this. Scammers online dating are wonderful at this. They'll say, "Oh, I'm a Christian," or whatever religion of the people that are in that area. Um, or I'm in the military, or I'm a very successful person. I have a lot of money. And the reason they mention those things is because it's very disarming, because we all have this kind of hidden bias that people in the military have good, strong moral character, or same with the police to some extent, right? But we tend to trust people in certain positions. And that can get us in trouble. So the point of all of this is these are some of the challenges that any of us are going to go up against when we're trying to make it known that another person is highly problematic, that they lie, they cheat, they steal, they do whatever, that they're pathological, they're pathological liar, that um, they're trying to ruin your life, this, that, and the other. Because of all of these different principles that are at play, other people tend to not believe that. It's very difficult for them to accept that. And especially if they've never seen that side of the person. So there's so many things that work. So this is why it's important, if you're going to try to like out somebody, to get as much of a paper trail, kind of black and white trail of what's going on, because your word against theirs isn't going to get you very far. Because for most people, hearing about this outrageous behavior of this other person, they're going to they're more often than not, they're going to think, oh, you're the one with the problem, you're blowing this out of proportion, or you're a bitter and jaded ex, or you're jealous, or um, something. So, and I would also encourage you to think about, what is the purpose, what end result are you going for with trying to make this other person's behavior known? And is it worth it? Because narcissists, people, well, not even necessarily narcissists, people that have a high degree of narcissism, let's put it that way, to where their behavior is dangerous and destructive, they don't like to think of themselves as a dangerous and destructive person, more often than not. Sometimes they do, but more often than not, they don't. They're smug, they're superior, they think they're better than everybody else, these kinds of things. And so to kind of kick out the legs of that chair from underneath them doesn't tend to go over very well. So, um, if you're going to be kind of kicking a bee's nest, you want to have a plan. And it's kind of the same thing. So, yeah, lots to think about. Okay, let me see. Um, Jack. Oh, this is from James. James asks, I wonder how to deal with huge family betrayal. Well, I get my 2 cents on it is that it's the same way you would deal with any betrayal. And that's going to be through the use of boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. It doesn't really matter if they're family or not. The only difference with family is it can be a lot more awkward implementing those boundaries, standards, and deal breakers, because you've got a bunch of other people that tend to be around them that enable that behavior. Oh, well, you should just know your mom is just like that. Or Aunt Aunt Polly is like, uh, she didn't really mean that. Or oh, that's Uncle Bob. Well, he had a bad childhood. And you need to be more compassionate. So there's all kinds of enabling people running around out there, and in families they come in droves. So at the end of the day, it's very rare to have, especially a family dynamic, where everybody's going to understand your point of view, and they're going to, and that they would be supportive of whatever protective action that you need to take in terms of boundary standards and deal breakers. So I would encourage you to not wait for everybody to approve of whatever decision that you decide. So if you realize, gosh, you know what, I need to, and every person and every situation is going to be very different. You will know when you're kind of making that correct balance when you have peace back into your life. So if there's been this massive family betrayal, it might be getting some distance from those people, either financially or physically or emotionally or all of the above. If there's other people that enable that behavior, which can go to all kinds of problematic degrees, uh, if other people in your family are working to actively undermine you, then it might be time to get some distance from them as well. So it's difficult with families because families tend to have, there tends to be a lot of blurred boundaries, and there tends to be a lot of unresolved, like emotional pain too, like unresolved situations in families. So it's just kind of that much more volatile, but thinking about what you need to do and then making that happen. So maybe it's deciding that the way that you spend holidays with family needs to change a little bit or a lot. Or maybe that certain people that you feel that it's not healthy for you to, have the kind of relationship that you currently have with them, like that needs to change. So like I said, yeah, your mileage may vary and your situation is your own. And so thinking about what do you need to do, and not waiting for other people in your family or even outside of your family to agree with that. Okay, Helpful Mom mentioned, she says, if I'm in a yellow zone, I'm feeling resentful or annoyed. Yes. Yes, that's very common for that yellow zone. And that's so important that we're able to slow things down when we realize, hey, I, like I'm feeling resentful, I'm feeling annoyed. Some great ways, and then taking that a step further is, okay, how do those feelings of resentment or annoyance tend to present themselves in your life? For some of the common ways, it can be ruminating thoughts where you're thinking the same thing over and over again. You're rehashing a certain situation or a certain conversation, or you're thinking about this one person who is just under your skin, and you're thinking about him and thinking about him and thinking about him, and you're winding yourself up. Uh, or you find yourself talking about a specific person. Let's say if you do have a therapist or a good friend, and you're continually quote unquote, venting to them about the same person time and time again. If you're gossiping about somebody, which often tends to get blurred with venting. So if you're continuing to talk about somebody and how they've mistreated you and what's going on, whenever we're kind of hyper fixated on one person or a situation, it tends to be because it's unresolved. There's stuff there that a lot of like boundaries that need to be adjusted, and undelivered communication. So things that we wish we would have said, things that we wish we would have said different. Um, it tends to all revolve around boundaries. So when our boundaries are violated, and that will happen, it's just going to happen, but it's to the degree and frequency and duration, I guess, of how those boundaries are violated, that tends to be in direct proportion to how much we're thinking and talking about it. Does that make sense? So if somebody cuts you off on the road, that might irritate you. That might even irritate you enough where you're thinking about it for the next 20 minutes. If you have a coworker who's continually borrowing, coming into your office when you're at lunch and taking office supplies off your desk, and there's just kind of not a respect for your boundaries. They're eating your lunch. They're, I don't know, like they're stirring the pot. They're kind of gossiping about you. They're continually trying to set you up with this other coworker, even though you've made it clear to them that you don't want to date anybody that you work with and you're not interested in this other person anyhow. um, they just keep stepping over boundaries with you. They're asking deeply personal questions. They're doing stuff. That stuff, any one of those events might seem as insignificant as getting cut off in traffic, but because there's so many of them, they're so frequent and it's so ongoing that it builds up. And if you find yourself continually thinking about this person, how much they annoy you, how much they frustrate you, what's wrong with them, why can't they just figure this out, yada yada yada, like you're just going, your brain is going on and on about it. That tends to be some great signs that you are in that you're moving from yellow to red, like at that point. So just noticing those things about yourself, like where am I along this spectrum, and what needs to happen in order to move closer to the green. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll here. Cha cha cha. Let me scroll here. Oh my goodness. Nero Zero said, my therapist tried to start a sexual relationship with me. He is 81 and I'm 40. Should I report him or leave it as he's really old? Personally speaking, I strongly encourage you to report it because his behavior is wildly inappropriate. Um, on so many different levels. And one of the reasons it's so inappropriate for a therapist to try to cultivate a sexual relationship with their client is there's an unequal power dynamic at play. So it's not uh, a relationship of equals right out of the gate, and these kinds of unequal dynamics are very ripe for manipulation, and that's why they're so wildly inappropriate. So here you are coming from a place of complete openness and vulnerability and trust, and um, um, you're just incredibly vulnerable. This person knows everything about you, and for them to then move that into uh, wanting a sexual relationship, it just it's just it's so not okay. It's so not okay. And really any professional worth their salt would step back from that, and they definitely wouldn't bring that into the room um, and introduce that topic just because it's so inappropriate. And I shudder at the thought of how long this guy has been doing this to his clients. You're probably not the first. So, yes, I would encourage you to report it. This is, I mean, it's just, it's just so inappropriate. It's just so incredibly not okay. And the damage that that tends to do to clients is huge across the board, especially if the relationship doesn't work out. They feel violated, they feel manipulated, they feel betrayed. It feels like an emotional rape. It's a really, really horrific thing. And it's against the code of ethics for any therapist. So, but with that said, this is at the end of the day, this is your decision. But I wouldn't let this person's age factor into it at all, because um, the damage that he can do at 81 is the same that he could do at 21. It's not okay. It damages a client's ability to trust. It damages potentially all of their future relationships with therapists. That's one more loss that they've accrued in their life. It's one more um, person who has betrayed them, and it's yeah. So those are my thoughts on it, but yeah. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll here. Hey, Magalodoros here. He says, "Yay, I made it before the end today." Hi, Dana. Hi, we're glad you made it. Uh, Julie says, "Thank you, Dana." Yeah, it's difficult to navigate. Believe me, I will try my best. She's an information collector. Yeah, people like that can be exhausting. I would just encourage you to, and again, I don't know your situation. But frankly, another thought is to handle it with as much fun and as lighthearted as you possibly can, because family gatherings are not the time to like be assertive and set boundaries. It just tends to not go over well. If you really do want to try to set boundaries with her, that kind of stuff's better done one-on-one when both of you are in an approachable kind of neutral mood to where it doesn't feel attacking. You're calling her up like a week later, "Hey mom, uh and again, this is like going to depend on how open she is to stuff like this. Gosh, you were asking me about work and this. I just want you to know this is just kind of a sensitive topic for me. And I know you mean well, but I'd really just rather not discuss it. Like, I hope you understand." And then hopefully that'll kind of, you know, it's said in a tactful way, and it's said in a non-confrontational way, in at a non-confrontational time, which can make all the difference. But while you're there, another way you could handle it while you're there is kind of jokingly. So if other people, let's say other family, starts ganging up on you, and you're like, "Gosh, I can't get away. Everybody wants to know like stuff that I don't want to tell them." Um, you could say, "Okay, well, I'll tell you the answer, but it's going to be very difficult for you to guess. But you have to guess." And then they'll say, what are you talking about?" "Okay, well, we're going to play a game. It's called One Truth or Two Lies and One Truth, where I'm going to give you three answers. Two of them are lies, one of them is the truth. And then you have to guess. And I'm not going to tell you which one is which." But then what you do is you then tell them three lies. You don't tell them the truth. And then, and ideally, if you make all of the lies outrageous, like one of them is you got abducted by aliens, and the other one is your boss got abducted by aliens, and the third one is, I don't know, whatever, you got abducted by Bigfoot. And they say, "Well, no, well, which one is the truth? Like, all three of these are lies." And then you could say something along the lines of, "Well, I told you it was going to be very difficult to play this game." And then just kind of laugh it off. Just a thought. It's just a thought. You get clever when you have a dysfunctional family. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Magladora says, "LOL, I love that idea. Definitely going to use it next time somebody puts me through that." Good deal. Uh, let's see. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Um, yeah, Darlene says, she says, I say always report sexual harassment. Not reporting allows them to continue and possibly harass others too. Jennifer says that guy needs to retire. He probably hasn't because he still wants to prey on people. And here's the thing, even if he did it in the most respectful, um, non-predatory seeming way, that it didn't feel like sexual harassment. Let's say he said at the end of a session, I just want you to know I think you're amazing. I've been looking for somebody like you my whole life. I just feel we have this really deep connection. And, I was just wanting to know, like, would you be interested in going out for dinner sometime? Even if it was done in a very tactful way, it's still wildly inappropriate and illegal and worthy of losing his license. In that type of situation, it's the therapist's job to uphold their ethics and not yours. So, because I've heard of clients that feel like, oh, well, you know, um, what did I do? Did I inadvertently open a door? Was I too friendly? Was I too chatty? Um, did I give off mixed signals? Um, or maybe I'm flattered that this person was so interested in me, or there can be a wide range of thoughts and feelings that accompany that kind of breach of ethics on his end. But at the end of the day, he knows that. He knows where that ethical line is. He knows that's the law. And he knows that his license depends on him walking that line. It's not a blurry line in the slightest. And um, it's up to him as a professional to keep his thoughts and feelings about any romantic interest he has in you to himself. And potentially, if he's not able to do that, then or if those thoughts and feelings persist to where it's interfering with his treatment, then he is better off recommending a different therapist to you and stepping aside because his romantic interest um, is impeding that therapeutic relationship. So yeah, Magaladora says, yeah, you're definitely not the first if he's 80. Yep, probably not. Let's Oh, I don't know. Chat's all over the place. I'm trying to pull out some comments here. Um, Darlene, I'm curious, what did I miss here? And what did you mean by this? She says, she's talking to Kevin and says, racism is the single stupidest idea mankind has ever come up with. Well, that and sexism. I'm curious, what did I miss here? And I agree that racism, sexism, these kinds of things, I think really in large part it's based on fear. It's fear of, with racism, I think it's just fear of the unknown. Uh, and, then you kind of rope in um, ideas of superiority and worldview and kind of different forms of problematic mindset that go with that. And that's how you get slavery and, profound forms of oppression and all kinds of stuff. But to me, it's a very Yeah. It's sad that it's still a thing. It's a very archaic, kind of simple-minded thing. I'm always shocked that we live in the year 2020 and that this is still such a prominent thing. But at the same time, there is such a thing, we were talking about earlier, there's hidden biases. And with, I think, racism, especially, there is such that subconscious fear of the unknown and fear of the unknown when it comes to other people. And it can be very easy to start making kind of hasty generalizations about how other people are, and um, and then to fear that and to resent them for that, and I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I wish there were more kind of open, honest discussions about things like this. I think that's the only way to ever overcome it, is to just go through it and to have these conversations about it. Same with sexism, same with uh, any imbalance of power or inequity. Okay, let's see. So let me scroll up here. Okay, adjourn says, if you see my question, please share your thoughts with me. I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say. I'm sorry, my anxiety is through the roof right now. Okay, let me scroll up and see if I can. Find what you were saying. Scrolling, 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 scrolling. Kevin Jones asks, am I a psychologist? No, I am a psychotherapist. So my master's degree is in counseling. Psychologists, at least here in the United States, normally have a degree in um, clinical psychology, whereas mine is clinical mental health. So very similar, except we don't tend to do a lot of the research or the testing that psychologists tend to do. Okay, and I cannot for the life of me find this comment. I am scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Is it still there? Uh, Sorry, guys. I am. Okay, I'm going to give it. Oh, is this it? Yes. Ha, ha, I almost gave up, but this is it. Okay. Adjourn says, Dear Dana, 1 month ago, I started talking with someone. He lives in another country. He is honest and kind. And today he told me that he is serious about me. How can I be 100% sure that this is real? Okay. Well, this is very difficult when the person lives in another country. At a minimum, I guess, how did you guys cross paths? Was it on a dating site, or what? And I guess not even that necessarily matters, because there's all kinds of people that will hit you up on Facebook or Instagram or any other social media. Um, so I guess some of the things to look for would be that you want to make sure that you do video chat with this person, to make sure that his pictures are actually of him. And then I would encourage you, I would just encourage you to move really, 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 really slow. So he might be very serious about you, but you guys have only been chatting for 1 month, and 1 month isn't long enough to know anything, really. Odds are during, if you've ever heard us talk about kind of the different stages of a relationship, there's that first stage, which tends to be like this idealized stage or this infatuation stage of a relationship. And that's that feeling of this person is so amazing. This is the what we call like the rose-colored glasses, right? Oh, and you're focusing on everything you have in common with this other person, and they're so amazing, and it feels like you never, like every other relationship before this has absolutely paled in comparison, and there's that intense amount of chemistry, and it feels great to really click with somebody. Then that in time, at about 90 days or so in, um, that tends to start kind of wearing off and is more replaced with, think people just start being more real. They start getting comfortable. And then you start seeing each other kind of a more complete version of the other person. You realize, oh my gosh, this person talks, they chew with their mouth open, or they snore a lot when they sleep, or um, they're really messy, or they have a lot of debt, or they don't want kids and you know, I want a bunch, or they're allergic to cats and I love cats. Or do you see what I'm saying? Like the differences start to surface. And differences, I'm sorry, I'm still so uncomfortably full. This is ridiculous. Differences aren't necessarily a problem. I mean, they can be if they're significant, but um, if there's differences with, oh, they're really messy and I'm really tidy, they have a lot of debt, I don't, like these kinds of things may or may not be deal breakers for you. Everybody's different, but differences with how we handle things in life, or um, handle each other's boundaries, and these kinds of things, when we enter that negotiation stage of a relationship, that's when these differences surface. And then that negotiation stage is, how are these differences handled? So it goes in one of two ways. Either there's these differences are able to be discussed. This is where that effective communication comes into play, and they're able to be resolved or handled appropriately, or 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 things end. It becomes a deal breaker. Or I guess there's a third path. Things end, or then you're locked into a power struggle. So it's kind of one of those three. They're either effectively communicated, they're resolved, the relationship ends, or you're locked into a power struggle. And in that power struggle, that's the the difference. I guess that this kind of three-pronged fork in the road is, this is where the relationship either becomes on the road to being healthy or functional, or starts going down the path of being unhealthy and dysfunctional. If it ends, then it ends, you know? But if, um, let's say there's a difference that comes up, you go out with your friends and he doesn't like this, and he becomes very, I don't, rude, or gives you the silent treatment, or starts treating you in a way that you're not okay with. And if you're able to discuss that and effectively resolve it, then that's good. If you're not and things end, okay, well, maybe that's good too. If he says that everything's fine and it's really not fine, and he's not being honest with his feelings and you're not being honest with yours, and this whole period of silent treatment and um, all this stuff goes undiscussed, now you're on the path towards dysfunction. So kind of paying attention to how does he handle stress, frustration, and anger, and how do you handle it? And then how do the two of you handle it together? Because that's what matters. That's nice. that he seems like a great guy, and that's nice that he thinks his feelings are real. I hope that they are. But frankly, it's kind of irrelevant. And the reason I say that, because it's more about you focusing on being discerning and focusing more on choosing a healthy partner for you than it is about focusing on, oh, I hope he's being honest with me, and I hope this relationship is everything that he's saying, and I'm looking outside of myself and I'm hoping that he'll um you know be so good to me, and I hope that I can just kind of do a trust fall back and that he'll catch me. So when you're going slow and you're paying attention, because relationships, I will tell you, relationships don't even get going. They don't even get out of the gate of being a relationship until a disagreement surfaces. That took me many, many, many years to realize, but it's true. So, um, let's see. Okay, that's fantastic. Adjourn says we already talked about abusive tactics like silent treatment or ghosting, and all those things are deal breakers for both of us. So I think that's good. That's good. There is um, on my website, thriveafterabuse.com, under, I think, the read section, book club. I have some notes up from the wonderful book called The Verbally Abusive Relationship by Patricia Evans. Highly recommend reading the book. Um, at a minimum, the notes that I have on it are kind of just the very distilled version of a lot of the forms of dysfunctional communication that's also verbal and emotional abuse. This kind of stuff tends to really fly under the radar. So it talks about silent treatment and withholding and um, kind of shaming and diverting and being dismissive or invalidating, all kinds of behavior that most people, I don't think, tend to think about in terms of this is actually, this is abusive and it's deeply dysfunctional. And that's why it feels abusive and deeply dysfunctional, because it is. So having that validation of what kind of problematic behavior is actually problematic uh, can be really helpful. So I will tell you, one of the things that I've learned over the years is just how important it is to find a person, um, for both people, really, to be interested in personal growth. That's so huge. And if a person's not into that, you're just not gonna grow and change at the same rate, especially if you're here, frankly. If you're here, if you're interested in these kinds of videos with self-help or um, any type of like introspection and wanting to make your life work or examine, just psychology in general, I would encourage you to add that to your list of must-haves in a relationship. Somebody that's interested in that, because they can be absolutely wonderful, but you will very quickly outpace them. And soon you will find that the level of emotional intelligence is drastically different, and that relationship will start to soon fizzle out. So, okay, let's see. Elizabeth, Jack. Oh, you're so welcome. Adrian says, I'm crying right now, but they are happy tears. You have no idea how many things I learned from you. Thank you so much for everything. You are so very welcome. And that just makes my heart smile. I'm so glad that you've been able to get some of the clarity and validation that you've been looking for. Okay. So Elizabeth's question is, Can you address stalking that occurs long term? And actually, and I will real quick, Jennifer, this is a really fantastic piece of advice. Says, another good piece of advice would be to have him stay at a hotel or an Airbnb so he's not at your place for at least the first time meeting, so you can have a place to retreat to if things go bad. Yes, absolutely. I agree with that completely. Absolutely. Just take it slow. There's a lot of kind of smooth talkers out there, and um, it's easy to get caught up in our emotions to where we're not seeing things clearly. And it's just kind of difficult to assess a situation for what it is when there's such a degree of distance between the two people. So I would encourage you, lots of Zoom, lots of FaceTime, um, talking and while you're together, talking about asking each other questions. You can do a Google search for like relationship questions, getting a feel on what does he think? What does he think about these things? What is religion and money and kids, and these are kind of fun questions anyhow, I think, to ask other people, like friends and people that are in your inner circle. It's amazing the things that you can learn about them, and that they can learn about you, and it just takes your relationship to a deeper level. Like, what are their hopes and dreams and fears, and you know kind of doing a little bit of a deeper dive there. Okay, so Elizabeth asks, stalking that occurs long term. um, Bonnie makes a great comment to that. She says, I think stalking is a major control move and dangerous too. Yes, absolutely. I would agree with that. It more often than not is a major control move. I think, kind of frankly, best case scenario, you're looking at somebody who has major control issues and um, who is more personality disordered. Worst case scenario, you're dealing with somebody who has some untreated mental illness and who is really not sharing the same reality as you, and that obsessiveness is not founded at all in reality, and that's its own level of terrifying. So either way you dice it, you lose in that kind of a situation. um, this is There are times where I think the how to handle a situation like this is to move and to get off the grid as much as you can. That is going to mean not sharing your new address with anybody. It's going to mean Googling, and I would encourage everybody to take some time and do this in the near future. Google your name, see what comes up. You might be horrified by what comes up with as far as the amount of personal information. Know what is out there on the internet about you and how much personal information is out there. So, um, uh, if you change your address, consider getting a post office box. Then that's going to be your new mailing address for everything. When I have a post office box, and a lot of places won't take a post office box. So what I do is, um, so for example, my post office box, which is for mailing, you can mail me anything you want. It's PO Box 464 in Mason, Michigan 48854. The street address is 144 West Ash Street. Okay. So for places that are like, oh no, we don't take a post office box. I'll I'll actually I don't even use the phrase post office box anymore. I just give them the address of the mail, the post office. So I'll say, oh, my address, my mailing address, yeah, it's 144 West Ash Street, number 464. And I don't even put the words post office box in there. And it just bypasses that whole conversation. So I don't give out my personal address. I don't have it. It's not out there on the internet anywhere. Um, I've had issues. So, um, just being aware of the information that's out there. um Taking different routes to work. um Sometimes it might mean, sometimes for some people, it means moving to a different state. Sometimes it can mean changing your last name or changing your first and last name. Sometimes it's going to mean, changing your job if you're going to stay in the area. It tends to require drastic measures in order to get this kind of thing to stop, because you're not dealing with a normal, reasonable person. You're dealing with a very unreasonable, dangerous, unpredictable person. So Elizabeth says, "Ooh, thank you for this post office tip." Yes, yeah, and Magalodora, great point. He says, "Change your locks." Yep, yep. Even if you move, even if you don't have any issues, even if you're not even dealing with the stalker, if you move into a new house, a new apartment, and even if you're like, oh, okay, this isn't a really nice area. I'm not looking over my shoulder. There's nobody, that I'm aware of that's out to get me. Get those locks changed. It is worth it. It is absolutely, you don't know who has a key. You don't know who else might have a stalker. You don't know. So actually, along those notes, let me tell you guys a really wild story about this. Hold on a second. So, okay, Monica. Um, oh, okay. Monica asked, does one person have to be a narcissist in order for that person to be toxic? Absolutely not. Nope. If we're talking flat out narcissist, or sociopath or psychopath, that's extreme. And but it does definitely by no stretch has to be all the way to that degree. And maybe back soften it up a little bit. Think about it in terms of what kind of what's uncomfortable for you. So we don't need to spend all of his time and energy trying to figure out, is this person a narcissist? Are they a sociopath? Or are they just a person with I don't know, who's at a bad place in life, who just happens to lie and cheat and steal and do all this? Like, what's the difference? Frankly, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. If that behavior, for our purposes, for everyday purposes, if that person has behavior that is not okay with you, or if it's dangerous or destructive, or um, causes harm to you, or impacts your kind of m- peace of mind or overall mental and emotional health, then it's not healthy for you. And so then kind of thinking, okay, if this is not healthy for me, is there anything that I can do with my boundaries or standards or deal breakers? Or not, if I can, what needs to happen with my boundary standards and deal breakers in order to make this a healthy dynamic? And sometimes that might mean cutting off contact with that other person and never seeing them again. Sometimes it might mean having um, a very honest, assertive, tactful conversation with them about something that they're doing that doesn't sit well with you. There's that whole range there. But okay, I'm gonna tell you this quick story about changing locks in houses and stuff. Googling, Googling stuff. This, so I am getting close to moving, and I've been wanting to buy a house. I found this house. I absolutely fell in love with this house. Okay, it was amazing, amazing, amazing. And it was, man, the price was right, the location's amazing, everything about it amazing. Call the realtor, and he says, yeah, it's a great house. There's three things I need to tell you about it, though. The first is there's some water in the crawl space. Nothing to really freak out about. It's going to need an extra drain. The way the lot kind of slopes, it can be an issue, but it's built on this kind of like rock foundation, and there's just going to be moisture down there. But I mean, this house is over 100 years old. It's just, it is what it is, but you can put it in another drain. The second thing is that there was a shooting there. And the third thing is that the hot tub in the backyard does not work. And I said, I'm sorry, did you say that there was a shooting?" And he says, "Oh, yes, yes, but really, it's nothing. It's just really, nobody was killed, nobody was hurt, not a big thing. Most people are more concerned about the water in the crawl space." And I was like, "Well, that's interesting on a couple different levels, but I'm really concerned about the shooting." And I said, "Well, what do you know about it?" And he says, "Well, it's really nothing. The owner thinks that it was directed towards him." I said, "Well, what? Uh, What?" Like, that doesn't make me feel any better at all. And he says, um, I said, "Well, can you find out some more details?" And he says, "Well, I really don't want to pry." And I said, "Well, I understand that you don't want to pry because what you find out, you legally have to disclose." And I can see the dilemma that that kind of puts you in. Um, but uh, that's concerning. And anyways, long story short, we ended up Googling the house, and it turns out that it was has ties to the mafia, and that some people had gone to jail and like for murder. For five, the house had been raided and it had this like long standing sordid mafia history. And I just thought, oh my God, um, like that would be my luck, right? Buy this house, I'm so in love with it, and then I get the mafia member that didn't, update his Rolodex and comes looking for this other guy who's no longer there. Uh, yeah, wild, wild. So, okay. So the point is, it's amazing what you can find out on Google, and it's worth Googling. It's worth taking the time to Google things. Um, a king asks, oh, he's talking to Jack. And so I'm gonna read your question out loud just so people on the podcast or who's listening to this video can understand it. A king asks, do narcissists use false confessions? Do they make false confessions? Yes, all the time. So, but lots of people will make false confessions. Um, People lie when they're uncomfortable with the truth. Like that's the vast majority of the reason people tend to lie, that they're uncomfortable with the truth. And that uncomfortable or that discomfort with the truth can take many different forms. Maybe they're deeply insecure about something. So they tend to lie. They tend to just make up complete lies about how much money they make or where they, I don't know, their history with things or who they're friends with or all kinds of things. They might just completely elaborate. Or maybe they're uncomfortable, or maybe they're lying for attention and they're making up stories that they were kidnapped or that who knows, or they're some people lie in order to get their way. You see this a lot on different crime shows when they're interviewing well, I mean, gosh, look at any like true crime show where there's a person that's committed murder, especially one that's murdered their significant other, right? They're pretending to cry, they're going on news shows. We've got to find my spouse, and this is so tragic. We've got to find the person who did this, and I love my children, or I love my wife or my husband. I want them back. And then they find, hard evidence that this person actually murdered their family. And then they're what? No, I didn't do that. How could you say that? That's an outrage. That's not me. It was somebody else. And so yeah, people people lie a lot, especially people with bad behavior, because they don't want the consequences. Nobody wants the consequences, frankly, really, right? Like nobody wants the consequences of their bad behavior. We all really want to be able to just do what we want to do without consequences. I want to be able to eat ice cream and not gain weight. It doesn't work that way. Tragic. Tragic that it does not work that way, but it does not work that way. People want to speed and not get a ticket. People want to sleep in and get to work late and not get in trouble for it. And so people, you know what I mean? People make up lies all the time. Oh, got held up in traffic. I got a flat tire. My car wouldn't start. It's like, no, you slept in. Like that's it. That's what happened, you know? Um, with people that have persistently problematic behavior, they have especially when it's a pattern of lying, cheating, stealing, these kinds of things, they tend, and if they're still in a quote unquote relationship with another person, it's because they want to have their cake and eat it too. They like the conveniences of being in that relationship. Maybe they like the dual income. They like having somebody help them out with the kids. Or maybe they just don't want the inconvenience of having to move. So they're going to kind of play the part of being in a relationship, and then they're just going to go out and cheat and do whatever else they want to do because they have no problem with that. And then they're going to do all kinds of mental gymnastics usually to justify to themselves why their behavior is okay. And if they get caught, then this is where you can see these mental gymnastics in motion. Oh, I cheated because it's because of something, because she threw herself at me, or you didn't throw yourself at me, or, you know, because of the kids, or I've worked long hours, or this or that. There's always an excuse. And if you do get a sincere, or what sounds like a sincere apology or confession, you know, it's it can be very difficult to say if it's truly sincere. Um, if they have a long-standing pattern of doing the same, then more likely than not, it's not true. And I think instead of trying to figure out, is their apology sincere? It's That's the wrong question to be asking. That asking that question is just going to lead us to be chasing our tail, trying to figure out something that we'll never really be able to figure out. The better question to ask ourselves uh, is this something that I want in my life? Because if this person has said that they apologize and that they're deeply sorry, then um, if I stay with them, then how is that going to change me as a person? Because it will change you. It's going to contribute to anxiety and a lot of kind of self-soothing behaviors, which more than likely are not going to be constructive. Um, it's going to cause a lot of kind of distrust. It's going to be very, very difficult to rebuild trust. And you can't be the one to rebuild trust. They have to be the one to rebuild trust with appropriate behavior over a prolonged period of time. And that also goes in part with living a life of total transparency, and they have to be willing to do the work of repairing the damage done. So if they've regardless of what they've done, well, let's just say cheating, because that tends to be a really common one. If they've cheated, then they need to realize you're going to have a ton of questions. You're going to have difficulty trusting them. You are going to be on them like white on rice. And you're going to have issues if they're on the phone, if they're taking the phone with them into the bathroom and they're in the bathroom for an hour, if they're hiding their phone underneath their pillow, if they they lunge for their phone every time you walk past it. Um, they're acting squirrely. Do you see what I'm saying? Like they can't do that and rebuild trust. That kind of behavior is the opposite of rebuilding trust. It's continuing to damage trust. So regardless of whether or not they apologize, an apology is only as effective as the behavior that follows. So words aren't just, talk isn't just cheap, it's free. It's very easy to just say things, to just say words, but words aren't reality. Words are just words. It's the actions that actually put those those thoughts and words into reality. So if they're sorry, then prove it. And you're going to need to continue to prove it until that trust has been restored. So I hope that helps. Okay. Let me scroll. Um, Julie says, I can't go back, but there's no exit. Tell me how to move on, Dana. Okay, Julie, I guess let's spend some time here and try to get specific about um, what moving on would look like. So, I in kind of what's going on with your situation. So you said you can't go back. So do you have a place of your own? And do you have the basics like food, clothing, shelter, um, some sort of income coming in where that food, clothing, and shelter can continue? If you have, okay, so if you have the basics lined up, then that's wonderful. If you don't, then I would strongly encourage you to contact a local domestic violence shelter and see if they can help you come up with a plan with how to get those basics, um, how to get those basics. So that would be the first step with what moving forward looks like. So kind of just being able to land on your own 2 feet, and then that is a huge first step. Then it's going to be processing all, uh, well, not necessarily the second step in this, but um, I guess acknowledging that there is pain, and that even though even if this relationship was abusive or um, painful, or even if he treated you terribly, it's still the ending of a relationship, and there's still pain and hurt there, and it's a loss, and that it's going to take some time to grieve that loss. So I guess just kind of acknowledging that to yourself. A lot of people have a lot of mixed emotions at this time, and uh, people can feel like, well, what's wrong with me? Why do I miss this person? I shouldn't miss this person. People might say insensitive things like, oh, well, you should be glad this relationship's over. This person was, um, oh, I'm glad this person was gone. He was so terrible, blah, 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 which can make a person feel even worse, because then it's sort of like, well, gosh, what's really wrong with me if like other people think this person's so terrible and I still miss him, kind of a thing. So just acknowledging it's the end of a relationship, and endings are always a loss, and endings always feel like a loss, and there's pain that goes along with that, and that's very normal. So as far as moving forward, um, from that, let me scroll up here and see if she's responded to any of that. And this is such a big question, Julie, but um, I will just kind of give you some pointers as to what helped me in all of this. It was moving forward. I guess, first of all, making the commitment to move forward. So there was like a 4-step process that I had to mentally get clear with myself at that point in my life. And the first one was, I will not allow for what happened to me to end my life. So suicide was off the table. This is not a viable option. And I know that might sound really strange, but Making that decision to not end my life was a huge, it gave me a huge sense of relief and pain and peace, a lot of peace in my life, because I was debating about that almost daily of, okay, well, this could be an option and this, that, and the other, realizing, no, I'm not going to allow this to end my life. One less thing I have to think about. So suicide is not an option. The second step was, I am not going to allow what happened to me to um, destroy my life. And now that was a little harder to fully accept because it felt like it had destroyed my life. And in many ways it did. But I also thankfully had the clarity of mind at that point, um, of realizing that this was just a chapter in my life, that this wasn't my whole life, that my whole life hadn't been written yet. It had only been kind of written up to that point. So realizing I'm the author of my own life, just like you're the author of your own life, and you get to decide what each chapter is in this book and how long it is and who was in the chapter and all of that. There's a lot of power in realizing that. So making that commitment to yourself of that you're not going to allow this to destroy your life. If you feel destroyed right now, that's okay. It's temporary. It doesn't have to be permanent. Then the third decision I made was that I was going to use what happened to me for my highest and greatest good. And what that looked like in motion was kind of following that up with the commitment of the best revenge is a good life. So kind of building on that. So that was the path I was going to take of, I am going to use everything that comes downstream at me towards my highest and greatest good. If I am feeling really, if I'm feeling full of rage, if I am, um, what mainly rage, there was a lot of anger during that time. If I'm feeling so full of anger, I am not going to let this destroy me. I'm not going to let that pull me into that darkness. I'm going to take all that energy and I'm going to channel it. I'm going to transmute it into positive energy and positive results. So if I'm feeling really angry and hateful, I'm going to take that energy and I'm going to go organize my closet. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go just burn off that energy into doing something positive. And then, so once I got clear on the action I was going to take in order to kind of discharge a lot of that kind of nervous or angry energy, then the fourth step was, then I'm going to take what happened to me and I'm going to use it not just for my highest and greatest good, but for the highest and greatest good of others. And so what that looked like in motion was, if I so after I'd made that dedication of, okay, I'm going to take all this energy that's wrapped up in this anger and I'm going to channel it into something good. I'm going to clean my house. I'm going to organize my closet. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go do 10 jumping jacks. I'm going to organize the junk drawer. I'm going to balance my checkbook, whatever it might be. But I'm also going to use it for the highest and greatest good of somebody else. Sometimes that was as simple as holding the door open for a stranger. Sometimes it was smiling at somebody. Sometimes it was leaving a little bit larger of a tip when restaurants were open. Um, Doing something nice for somebody else, sending cards. I sent a lot of cards during that time. Uh, just kind of coincidentally, I had a lot of other people in my life that that had their own struggles. I had a friend that had cancer. I had another friend that was going through a divorce. Um, sending cards to them, letting them know that they were loved and that I was thinking about them, and something to just kind of put a smile on their face. And it's amazing. That four-step process helped so much. And that was how I was able to move forward And I just, um, I would encourage you to consider that 4-step process, because it's it puts you on a good path. And it's not, there's so much more that can go into it, but that kind of distills it down to the basic 4 steps of getting yourself out of that dark place and into this next chapter in your life, and making sure that this next chapter in your life is something positive, that next chapter doesn't include drug addiction or alcoholism, or um that you're not digging the hole deeper. So okay, let me scroll here. Okay, Monica says, okay, I'm posting my question again. So recently, my ex-husband's ex-wife, okay, who was a friend for a while, started guilt tripping me and asking me why I didn't call her enough. I blocked her. Um, Monica, where is the other part of this? Then she asks, was I dun dun dun. I cannot find the other half of the question. I'm going, okay. I'm guessing that the end of your question was, um, that basically, were you doing the right thing? So, uh, if every situation is different. So some people respond to us setting boundaries um, differently than others. And, you know, nobody likes guilt. It's such a turn off when people try to guilt trip into people into doing other things. So, um, another way to have potentially handled it would have said, well, I, um, like an assertive way. Again, this may or may not go over well. So I would say that a lot of the times assertive behavior or assertive communication doesn't go over well with a lot of people. It's uncomfortable because we're just not socialized to be assertive or to hear assertive communication. So when we do hear it, it can feel very aggressive. It can feel like an attack. But an assertive response would have been something along the lines of, um, well, it sounds like you would like for us to talk more often than we do. Um, I, I'm pretty busy. If you did value her friendship or whatever, letting her know, like, you know, um, I feel like we speak enough. I definitely don't want you to feel starved out as a friend. And, you can call me or you can text me, and I'll make more of an effort to be engaged with you and kind of see, um, but if she's really kind of quote unquote needy and she needs to talk to you, or she wants to talk to you like every day or just more than you really want, then it's okay to not want to do that. And just make your boundary clear of, I really value you as a friend, assuming if that's even true, I don't know. I value you as a friend. I'm really busy. Uh, it sure seems like the connection that you like to have with your friends is one that I'm just not used to that. And I don't, um, I don't really talk to my friends on an hourly basis or whatever it is, a daily basis or what have you. It doesn't mean that I care about you any less. It's just kind of the connection I have with my friends just is less than what you like to have. And maybe we can find more of a middle ground there or something along those lines. Monica also asked, Dana, when you confronted Jack to return your money, were you afraid of what he might do? Where did you get the courage from? When I, God, it was so long ago. When I confronted him, I don't think I was thinking clearly. Um, I had never knowingly met anybody that had that kind of behavior before, that was like that sociopathic. And so it just wasn't really on my, I was still very naive in many ways. And um, I just wasn't thinking straight. Knowing what I know now, I think I would have completely just been done and walked away and not tried to collect anything. But also at that time, I was pretty flat broke. And um and I just was so, I don't know. I was still at the beginning of understanding so many things. And in my mind, uh, I don't know, it was just very clear. I'm like, well, the intention was always to have him pay it back. So I do still expect you to pay it back. And um, yeah, had he been violent, or had I seen, um, like scary anger with him, had our dynamic been different up to that point, my response to all of that probably would have been very different. At least I'd like to think so. I don't know if I had that level of like situational awareness at that time. I'd like to think it would have been different. I'd like to think that I would have um, probably just left good enough alone and not poked an angry dog. So, um, yeah. So I don't know if I would say that that was courage. I think it was more of just naivete, that like I just didn't see any of that coming. I really didn't. And then I was in shock with all of the deceit. And when I started putting things together and thinking, oh my gosh, is this nuts? Is this reasonable that this person, I think, could have been trying to kill me? And but pretending to be like what my partner and one of my best friends this whole time. I mean, it was just very, very, very confusing and terrifying. And yeah. Gideon asks, I need guidance on things to keep in mind while negotiating alimony with my narc wife. Please help. Okay. I guess the first piece of advice would be to talk to your attorney and see, is, 'cause I think for sure every country, but every country and every state is different in terms of alimony. What are you in for here? Like, what are you looking at? So sometimes putting a face on that monster can help you go to battle with it. So if in your area it's okay, she's legally entitled to alimony, and it's going, but quote unquote, it's only still a long time, but it might only be for a year or 3 years or however long. Getting clear on like what you're in for. Um, in certain situations like that, where, and if your attorney's advised you, like, this is it, like, we can't fight this, this is how the law sees this, and this is just the path that we just need to do, and you're at a place of trying to make peace with that. Um, one of the things that's worked for me when I've had to shell out money in for things that were kind of lessons learned the hard way, was to think of it as tuition at the school of hard knocks. And frankly, that's some of the best money that you'll ever spend. If you can squeeze out as many lessons as you can from this whole experience about what you're looking for in a significant other, um, you know, it's across the board. Trust, if you're lessons learned about trust, lessons learned about money, lessons learned about a life partner, lessons learned about yourself, and um, value, your self value, and um, all of it. Then it can be some of the best money you've ever spent. So Jennifer asks, Dana, what is a narcopath? Gosh, I have not heard that word in a long time. I think we kind of as a joke, like one of those just hybrid words that we came up with years ago, just it's not obviously not an official word. It's just a word we came up with of between like a narcissist and either a sociopath or a psychopath. Like you're a little bit of both. You're just the narcopath. I can't decide, but you're somewhere in that spectrum. Uh, let's see. Let me scroll. I don't know. This stuff that goes on in this chat is so funny. I don't know where it just. I'll stop the chat because I'm trying to think and articulate articulate those thoughts, and then I'll come back to it, and it's the most random thing. And people are talking about sharpening pencils, which is hilarious. Uh, you guys are so funny. The kind of random directions this chat goes in. Lori's saying, yeah, sharpening pencils is therapeutic to me. I could see that. That would, I love the sound of sharpening pencils, either manually or with an electric sharpener. Like that could be an ASMR video for me. I love that sound. It makes me feel like, yeah, just getting to be productive. Like things are gonna happen. Like I don't know. It's like this. It kind of brings out the inner third grader in me that's gearing up to do something. I don't know. Weird. Uh, let's see here. Let me. People are talking about kind of suicidal thoughts, and Jennifer says that she says, I don't know if I was really necessarily suicidal because I wasn't willing to do it in the moment, but I just gave myself the option just in case. Yes. And that's that's that if we're going to go back to that green, yellow, red type zone thinking, that level of kind of flirting with the idea of, yeah, this is in the realm of possibility. This is on the table. This is on the menu of options of how I could handle this. That's dangerous thinking and it's concerning thinking. And uh, if anybody's listening to this right now, please know if you're struggling with even toying around with the idea or being remotely interested in this as a suicide as a possibility, please consider reaching out to a local suicide hotline. You don't have to be standing at the foot of a bridge in order to call them. You, I would encourage you, and frankly, I would encourage you to not wait until you're at that place to call them. Call if you're in that yellow zone where um, you're starting to kind of have these ideas or you're they're in the realm of possibility. It's absolutely an appropriate use of a hotline like that to reach out and just talk to somebody. So these kinds of relationships, an abusive relationship, It's an incredibly traumatic, painful relationship, and you're not alone in that. And a lot of people tend to be left with um, really struggling in a lot of different ways. And suicidal thoughts is definitely one of those ways. So it's, you matter. And, uh, and I just would encourage you to reach out. And also for, um, oh, we were talking about therapy and things earlier. I also want you guys to know that a lot of places, especially now, this is what's so exciting now with kind of where we are with things in the world. Most places that have a 4-year university also have a counseling center. And if they offer master's programs in psychology, social work, or counseling, then odds are that counseling center is staffed with students. So they tend to offer free counseling, which can be fantastic. So that's just a thought too. If um, I know counseling can be expensive, and um, insurance can, there can be a lot of barriers to getting the help that people need. So that is a possibility. And I would encourage you to think about that as a possibility of reaching out to your local university and seeing if they have a counseling center and what all that would entail. So just some thoughts. That's interesting. Amber says, I took the QPR suicide prevention training since my daughter flirted with suicidal ideation. I think everyone should take this short training. I've used it to help a few friends. That sounds fantastic. I would be interested in taking that training as well. I'm going to copy and paste that. Jennifer says, my boyfriend was saying today that I matter just as much as anyone else. Well, I like him already, Jennifer. And she said, well, this was weird because I just happened to be thinking about that this morning, about how weird it is to think of myself as worthy. Yeah, it is kind of um, a weird way to think of it, as worthy, but realizing your wants and needs matter just as much as anybody else's. So maybe that's another way to kind of think about it, of, yeah, you matter just as much as anybody else. You matter. You do. Your wants and needs matter. And uh, they don't need to always go on the back burner. You don't need to always come last. It's okay to make, and it's important for self-care to get those, to make sure that you're in a good place with your wants and needs in order to be there for other people. One of the things I have to say, one of the biggest differences that I've noticed between nursing and counseling that I absolutely love is nursing, there is really no talk about self-care. In fact, it's the opposite. There's very much an expectation that you will sacrifice yourself in the name of patient care, that you will work long hours without eating, without going to the bathroom, without days off. You will do whatever it takes to take care of your patients. And that, I think that's wonderful to a point. If it's to the point, to that degree, that's not, there's not, that's martyring yourself. If that's not, that doesn't do anybody any good. And the difference with counseling, it's self-care is so important. It truly is treated as a necessity and not a luxury. And it's considered unethical for us to work in any capacity if we're not able, if we don't have our own stuff figured out, if we're not in a good place in our own life. It's not ethical for us to work with clients. because then we're putting them in harm's way. I was reading a post again on Reddit the other day about a therapist who was having trouble in her own life, and things began slipping at work, and she missed this um, important report. And anyways, long story short, her license, the couple was so upset with her because it endangered, and inadvertently, but still endangered their child. And because she didn't follow up on a certain report in time. And um, so she had the licensing board had been working with her, and you got to go to all these different training classes, and you got to kind of do all these things. Um and basically it came down to she had these things going on in her own life. She was struggling with overwhelm and depression, and um they were considering revoking her license because of it, because her issues in her life were impeding the care that she was able to provide to others, and that's not ethical. And it's harped on time and time and time again. When you go for your license, like it's one thing to have trouble in your own life, but it's also up to uh, a licensed practitioner to know when you're having trouble, so that you can adjust things, so that you can um, take some time off work, or lower your client load, or you do something to where your own life stuff isn't negatively impacting those that are relying on you. And I love that. like that level of self-care is just, it's front and center. And I just, it's so important to think of it that way. Like, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity, especially if we're in the helping field. And I think there's probably a lot of people listening to this that are in a helping profession: social workers, teachers, nurses, um, therapists of any kind, a lot of parents, um, just a lot of caregivers in general. And so self-care, it's not a luxury, it is a necessity. No, I don't. Ember says, "Hey, Dana, do you know about CPT?" Not CBT. It's an extremely effective PTSD. It's a lot of acronyms there. PTSD therapy. The podcast This American Life did a story on it that sounds fabulous. It may work faster than even EMDR. I have not, but I will tell you. I'm gonna Google it. Hmm. Let me dive into this, and we can talk about it next week, because that's very interesting. I love learning. There's so many tools and strategies and techniques that are out there that are just fantastic. Aisha asks, "Do you think untreated OCD is a valid relationship deal breaker?" I think anything that is, I think anything can be a deal breaker for anyone. So, um, yeah, there's so many things. Most people, I will say, most people kind of start off with the deal breakers of, okay, I'm not going to put up with being hit, physically abused, or cheated on. Like, those are their two and only deal breakers. And then they wonder why their life's not working. And then they kind of realize, after getting knocked around a little bit through life and through a wide variety of relationships that don't work, that maybe they need to expand or tighten up what they consider deal breakers. And so they extend that definition to be more encompassing. So then so for example, I'll just share with you some of mine. Um, No active addictions. So if it's a destructive addiction, whether that's gambling, alcoholism, drug use, you name it. So no active addictions like that. Uh, no abuse of any kind, verbal, emotional, psychological, physical. Abuse, no addictions, no adultery, so no cheating of any kind, and no bad attitude. Like I don't want to be around somebody who's chronically negative, who is always playing devil's advocate, who's just criticizing nonstop, who doesn't know how to have fun, who uh, is just a big wet blanket. Like I don't want that in my life. So those are some of mine. And that's just the start. Like there's a lot more. Girl, I'm at the place in my life where I if a guy is messy, like I don't have time for that. Like I'm not doing that. I don't want to be somebody's mother. I don't want to be their maid. Um yeah. So it's completely fine if and it's also completely fine to make things known. So if the relationship is otherwise great and this person has untreated OCD, to say, "Hey, you know what? I really enjoy this relationship. I really want to be with you. This is a problem for me. Like I really encourage you to get help, but I just want you to know that I can't and I will not live like this. So this can't just go on untreated forever. Like it either needs to get resolved, um, or we need to go our separate ways." So Magladora says so many people are addicted to coffee. That's a good point. Yes. And I guess that's kind of why I wanted to preface what I just said with destructive addictions. Um, and everybody's got their thing. Like some people, um, have no problem with smoking or with smoking pot or with, it's just kind of knowing where your own limits are. Some people don't want to date a person who drinks at all. Maybe they're a recovering alcoholic and they don't want to they don't want to be with somebody who drinks. And that's fine. Different religions are often deal breakers. Um there's a lot out there of certain divides that people just cannot or will not cross. Let's say you have kids, they don't want kids. Well, it's probably going to be a deal breaker. Or let's say neither one of you have kids, but then one of you decides that you really want to have kids. And that's the thing, is relationships are always in transition, because everybody's in transition. Like we're all growing and changing. And so the relationships that we're in are always growing and changing. So it might be really wonderful. Let's say you get married when you're 20 or 25 and things are great. And then you hit 35 and then your partner was like, "Hey, I think I want to have kids." And you guys both agreed that you didn't want to have kids. And then you kind of make peace with the fact of, okay, well, actually, maybe I do want to have kids after all. And then your partner tells you, "Oh, and by the way, I want to raise them. Uh, I want, I was raised Jewish and I want to raise them Jewish, you know?" And when you guys got married, religion didn't factor into things, or they want to raise them to be Catholic, or they want to raise them to be atheist. And then you realize, oh, actually, no, I think it's really important that children have uh, another type of upbringing. So the point is that there can be and there are deal breakers throughout the course of a relationship. It's not frankly, it's very rarely, if ever, just upfront stuff. You're There's always going to be this like continual kind of taking the temperature of a relationship to see where it is, what needs to be adjusted, and are we still on the same page with things, or have things changed? And can we adjust, or do we even want to try? Where are we with this? And then what's the game plan going forward? If we are going to try to adjust and pivot the relationship, steer it through kind of these rocky, stormy paths. James asks, can sex, I'm not sure the question, can sex be well addiction? Can sex be an addiction as well? I think is what he's asking. Yeah, sex can absolutely be an addiction. If you think about an addiction in terms of an unhealthy relationship with something, and part of the addiction process, what separates uh, addictive behavior from like regular use of something. I'm thinking in terms of alcohol, and I realized we were just talking about sex, and that sounded really weird, like regular use of sex. But the difference is with the addictive process, it tends to be a narrowing, kind of like a narrowing of fulfillment. So the more a person engages in this behavior, the more that they're finding it's only this thing that satisfies them. So that's kind of the difference between, a casual drinker, let's say, for example, um, or let's go back to sex as the example. A person might like to have quite a bit of sex on like a regular basis. And of course, everybody's different. Everybody has their own level of sex drive, but they might not, if they absolutely must have sex so many times a day or a week, or if it's, and especially if it's a problem for their partner, if their partner starts feeling like a blow up doll or replaceable, or like there's no connection there, like, oh, this could just be anybody. Like you're just kind of using my body to orgasm with, basically. Like it doesn't feel personal. It doesn't feel like there's any human connection there. Then that's a problem. If a person is using sex or masturbation in order to change the way that they feel, that kind of tends to go hand in hand with addiction, of using a substance or um, some sort of process in order to change the way that we feel. So, like thinking about alcoholism, for example, um, a person is gravitating towards that drink or that substance in order to. You might hear somebody say, "Oh, I need a drink to calm my nerves," or "I need a drink to because I'm just really upset," or "I just need a drink to feel like myself." These kinds of things, that these are all signs of there's an unhealthy relationship going on with that substance. So yeah, and we can be addicted to a wide range of things. I am addicted to, it's going to sound funny, but I'm addicted to soda water. Addicted. Like it's bad, but I'm it's I'm okay with it. I'm okay with kind of having that addiction to it because it's water, uh, you know. But it is a problem. I get anxious if I don't have it around. I get anxious if the store is out. I need it. I drink an obscene amount of it every single day, and I'm really grumpy if I don't have it. I know all of the restaurants around that serve it. I know I will not go to certain restaurants if they don't have it. Like that's how big of a thing it is for me. Is it destructive in the sense that it's negatively impacting my relationships with others? No. No. Um yeah. Is it something that I should probably try to cut back on? Yeah, probably. It is excessive. I realize this, but it's not destructive. So if soda water were to become if it were to like triple in price, then it might be a concern too, because it does get expensive. Then I might have to revisit this. James says, "Have you seen the show My Strange Addiction with the girls eating um, the foam and the cushions and such?" Yes, I could totally be on that show, My Strange Addiction, with my soda water. If you were to see my car, I cleaned it out the other day because I drink so much soda water, and I have all these different bottles of soda water, empty bottles in the back seat because I just toss them back there, and then I'll empty them out, I don't know, every couple of days. But I just laugh. I'm like, man, if if I got pulled over or if somebody else were to get in my car, they would wonder what on earth is going on in here. And this would obviously be a problem. If this was like beer cans or something, then people this would be very clear that it's a problem. So, yeah. Magalodora says, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but carbonation can contribute to kidney stones." Is it is it carbonation or is it the minerals in soda water? I don't because I'm very intentional about the type of soda water that I drink. I don't drink mineral water, and I don't drink water. I try to only get the kind that has no sodium because I drink so much of it. If carbonation can contribute to kidney stones, then that is the worst news I've heard in a very long time. And Jennifer says, "Is it the fizz? Do you like pop just as much?" I I really I don't know. It's everything about soda water. It's perfect. It's like the most perfect invention. It's clean, it's crisp, it's refreshing. Uh, you can put a little bit of fruit in it or just a little bit of a lime or lemon if you want. It's just very nice. So I just it's very clean and crisp. I like it. I don't drink soda. I might have a root beer. I do like That's one of the things I like about Michigan is there's a lot of like homemade root beer places around here. So we have some really great root beer. And I'll have, I don't know, maybe a 6 pack of root beer a year. Not very much. Meredith asks, "Okay, your top 3 sodas." I only have that one. It's root beer. It used to be Diet Coke, and then I switched to drinking soda water. But so now I just drink soda water. Every now and again I'll have root beer. Let's see. I'm gonna have to Google this. This is really scary, Magalodoro, about the whole carbonation causing kidney stones. I'm adding it to my list of things to Google. Okay, let's see. Okay, Aisha, this is a great question. She says, when your partner is going through a rough patch, what is a normal amount of bad attitude or lashing out that you should endure? I have no guide for healthy relationships. Ugh. Um, Okay, this is a really great question. Here's my 2 cents on it is I don't think that um lashing out is ever okay. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a deal breaker, but it's definitely worth having that discussion and making your boundary clear of that you understand he's going through a rough patch and that he's got a lot of stuff going on in his life, but that uh, you don't want to be his emotional punching bag and that you do still expect to be treated with dignity and respect. And uh, that you want to be able to be there and support him through all of this, but it's that you're not going to just take whatever he feels like throwing your way, kind of a thing. So, I feel like this is a completely reasonable request to expect other people to handle their frustration and anger appropriately. So, we would expect that at a job, right? If you were at a job and let's say you had a rough patch at work, you lost your top 5 clients and you have this new coworker who's just absolutely impossible to work with and you've got all kinds of stuff going on and maybe your hours were just significantly cut and things were really difficult at work. It's still the expected um, mature response to be able to have feelings of frustration and anger and fear and whatnot, and still be able to emotionally regulate ourselves and treat other people appropriately. So we could have a lot of stuff going on at work, let's say, going through a real rough patch, but it never makes it okay to then lash out at coworkers or at customers or clients or any of that. Like there's still that expectation of you've got to be able to separate the two. So you can feel how you feel. We all have times where we feel frustrated, angry, hurt, sad, mad, you name it. But that doesn't ever make it okay that we take it out on somebody else. And this is how and why when people are in abusive relationships, they tend to be confused because let's say, um, well, my common example is okay, let's say you go to the grocery store and you forget to buy cat food and you come back home and your boyfriend starts yelling at you. I can't believe you forgot to buy cat food. What the hell is wrong with you? You know the cat's been out of food. Now I've got to go to the store. Da, 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 and he's just ripping into you. And on the search, if we don't know better, if we don't have a solid footing for what is appropriate or inappropriate behavior or how we deserve to be treated just as human beings, which is with dignity and respect, um, then it can be easy to think, oh, well, I guess I had that coming. I forgot to buy cat food. Therefore, had I remembered to buy cat food, he wouldn't have yelled at me. So next time I'll remember to buy cat food so he doesn't yell. Now, I know he's having a hard time at work. I really shouldn't have. Um, I know we had plans on Friday and I shouldn't have even brought up anything. I should have been more compassionate or more sensitive. I should have done something different. And then that would have avoided him yelling at me. That kind of stuff it's nonsense. And that's uh, on the surface, it seems to make sense, but it's not. That's how it's walking on eggshells. That's um, the classic signs of a dysfunctional relationship. So it's like I said, it's completely, we all feel how we feel. We all get frustrated. We all get upset. But what separates a functional relationship from a dysfunctional relationship is how those feelings are handled. So in a functional relationship with, um, you know, that's a healthy relationship, you might feel like saying that, like, what's wrong with you? You went to the store specifically to get cat food and da, 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 da. You might feel that way inside, but we don't say it out loud. because the default is we treat other people with dignity and respect. So it's not okay to treat another person like your emotional punching bag, and vice versa. It's not okay for somebody to treat you like you're their emotional punching bag. So they can feel how they can feel, they're going to, but there's still that expectation of you need to behave appropriately. And sometimes I think it does help to kind of think about if this dynamic and this behavior was happening in a work environment. If they were a coworker, how this um for some reason people, and I get it because I was there too, but people get all kind of tangled up when they think about it in terms of relationships. But it becomes so much more clear if this was at work. If you had a dynamic at work where somebody was going through a rough patch and they just um, became belittling and criticizing and condemning and mistreating you, you wouldn't generally put up with it, right? You'd either talk to somebody about it or eventually you'd leave. You'd get a different job. And other people, the boss wouldn't tolerate being talked to like that. Other people hopefully wouldn't tolerate being talked to like that because it's not okay. Oh, okay, good. Macladora says, I was wrong. I think it's only sweetened carbonated drinks. I hope so, because I'm going to be so sad. I do know that mineral soda water, like Perrier, for example, that's mineral water, carbonated mineral water, can contribute to kidney stones because the mineral content, and it can actually contribute to kidney damage. Same thing with this. Okay, so this brand, this Schweppes Club soda, has sodium in it. Um, so it just have to be careful because this is not just one serving, this is 3 servings. And so, you got to multiply the sodium content by 3. Just little things to consider. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Well, guys, I think actually I'm going to sign off for this evening. We are almost at time. Oh my gosh. I thought I was going to end up signing off way early tonight. Glodora says, I'm sorry to scare you. It's okay. It's okay. I appreciate the concern. I'd much rather have, um, if you were right about it, I was joking. I would really much rather know the truth and change my behavior than to live in ignorance and then have kidney stones. So, uh, I appreciate the concern and the potential heads up. So, yes, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful day tomorrow. Sending all of you light and love. And I hope that you're able to take some time um, to maybe make a list or to just kind of think about different things that you are thankful and grateful about. I know it's difficult when there's so much uncertainty in the world right now, and there can be so much pain in the relationships that we have. Holidays are difficult, extremely difficult, and for a lot of people. But taking time to think about kind of the things that you are thankful and grateful for, a clean, hot shower. Uh, for me, it would be soda water. The quality people that are in your life, the little things the money that you do have in the bank, the food that you do have in the fridge, the roof that you do have over your head. These things, just slowing down, and it really can make an ocean of difference to be in the moment and taking time to just be thankful and grateful for the little things, the health that you do have. So many things, so many things. Well, you guys have a wonderful holiday and a wonderful rest of your week. And again, if you want to be notified when I go live, you can text the words Dana Live, DANALIVE, all one word, to the number 22999 if you are in the United States or Canada. So have a lovely rest of your week, and I will talk to you later. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care. Okay. Good night.